Lincoln Rhyme was once a legend in New York's investigative world, a master of forensic science, best-selling author, and the man behind the city's most complex criminal cases. But that brilliant career came to a crashing halt 4 years ago. During a routine investigation inside a tight underground tunnel, disaster struck. Without warning, a chunk of concrete collapsed from above and slammed into him. The impact was catastrophic. His spine was crushed. In an instant, Rhyme lost everything: mobility, independence, and control. He woke up in a hospital bed, paralyzed from the neck down. Now, Rhyme lives locked inside his own body, able to move only his head and one finger. His once normal apartment has become a high-tech medical command center, packed with machines, monitors, and a voice-controlled computer system he operates with a fingertip. Every day is a fight to maintain what's left of his life. Thelma, his tireless nurse, handles everything: meds, routines, and the constant monitoring of his condition. She makes sure he stays hydrated, forcing fruit juice on him to battle dehydration, even as he quietly longs for vodka to dull the pain. Meanwhile, Richard Thompson, a visiting technician, keeps the machines running, especially the unreliable heart monitor that could fail at any moment. During a routine equipment check, Richard informed Rhyme that his heart monitor was failing and had to be replaced. Rhyme, bitter as ever, joked that what he really needed was a whole new body. Richard promised to return the next day with a working unit, knowing full well that the real problem ran deeper. Rhyme's personal doctor, Barry Lehman, often came by, not just for medical care, but to discuss something far more serious. Rhyme had asked for assisted euthanasia. His condition was worsening fast. Seizures were becoming more frequent, fluid was building around his spine, and the risk of falling into a coma was growing. Rhyme didn't want to wait until he lost his mind and his dignity. He wanted to end everything on his own terms. After much resistance, a devastated Dr. Lehman finally agreed. He would help, but not until he returned from a medical conference that Sunday. Rhyme wished it could be sooner. At the same time, across town, Alan and Lindsay Rubin had just returned from a business trip. Alan, a wealthy real estate tycoon, was annoyed. Their private driver hadn't shown up. Lindsay, trying to stay calm, suggested they grab a taxi instead. It seemed like a small inconvenience, but that one choice would soon drag them into something far worse than they could have imagined. Not far from the airport, a predator was already in place. A cold-blooded killer, disguised as a taxi driver, waited patiently for his next victims. When Alan and Lindsay approached, he played the part, calm, polite, professional. Exhausted and unaware of the danger, the couple got into the cab. But the ride home never came. The streets grew unfamiliar. Across town, Lincoln Rhyme sat motionless in his high-tech apartment, his mind still razor-sharp despite his broken body. With only his head and one finger able to move, he stayed glued to his voice-activated computer, devouring forensic case files, staying engaged, and clinging to what still gave him purpose, solving puzzles no one else could. Elsewhere, Officer Amelia Donaghy was starting her day. Over coffee, she made it clear her focus was her career, not romance. Her boyfriend wanted more, but Amelia was all in on law enforcement. She had goals, and nothing was going to slow her down. Assigned to juvenile cases, she worked a tough beat with little glory but total commitment. While eating breakfast on the street with a colleague, her radio buzzed. A young boy had called in something serious. He'd seen a body lying by the subway tracks. Amelia was the closest unit on the map, and she didn't waste a second. She raced to the scene, arriving at a dark, grim corner near the subway. A frightened child stood nearby, pointing with shaking hands toward the tracks. What she found was chilling. The scene was a mess of scattered debris, but the real shock came from a body partly buried under a mound of crushed stones. One lifeless arm reached out, stiff and pale. On its skinned finger sat a woman's wedding ring, a twisted, haunting clue left in plain sight. Then came the sound, a train roaring toward the tunnel. Time was running out. Without flinching, Amelia jumped down onto the tracks. She waved at the oncoming train, forcing it to halt just in time. It was a bold move that saved more than just evidence. It saved the entire case. Rain was about to fall, threatening to wash away the clues. Thinking fast, Amelia sent the child to buy a cheap cardboard camera from a nearby shop. With only the basics in hand, she got to work, carefully photographing the scene and capturing everything, from the prints in the dirt to the small, deliberate signs left behind. After finishing her initial sweep of the crime scene, Amelia called it in. The response was fast. Within minutes, a full forensic team was on site, locking down the area and collecting evidence. But then, Captain Howard Cheney arrived, and the tone shifted. Instead of praising Amelia for preserving the crime scene, he lashed out, furious that she had stopped the train. His reaction was sharp and dismissive, leaving Amelia discouraged. She had risked everything to protect key evidence, yet her courage was met with criticism, not support. The first reports confirmed the worst. The dead man was Alan Rubin, a high-profile businessman who had vanished with his wife after arriving at the airport. His body told a grim story: shot mark, buried in crushed stone, and a single finger skinned to display his wife's wedding ring. Lindsay Rubin was nowhere to be found. Authorities feared she was still alive and being held by a killer who wanted to be seen. Two seasoned detectives, Paulie Solito and Kenneth Solomon, carried the evidence straight to the one man they trusted with this kind of puzzle: Lincoln Rhyme. Though confined to a wheelchair, Rhyme's mind was unmatched. His apartment had become a fully equipped forensics command center, designed around his condition but built for serious work. Paulie and Solomon laid out the facts. A couple had vanished after taking a cab. Now the husband was dead in a staged, brutal display near the subway. The wife was missing, likely kidnapped. With his unmatched instincts and decades of experience, Lincoln Rhyme immediately spotted the pattern. A wealthy man had been murdered in a brutal staged display, and the killer had placed his wife's wedding ring on the victim's finger. To Rhyme, the message was clear. The killer wanted the world to know the wife was still alive, and likely being used as leverage for a massive ransom. But just as Rhyme was breaking down the case, his body betrayed him. A violent seizure hit without warning. His breathing faltered, his body convulsed. Thelma rushed in and administered emergency treatment, bringing him back from the edge. Shaken, the detectives were asked to leave, giving Rhyme a chance to recover. Even as he lay weak and worn down, Rhyme's mind stayed locked on the case. He couldn't let it go. He instructed Thelma to contact his old network, trusted allies who had once worked at his side on the city's hardest cases, and most urgently, he asked for the officer who had shown exceptional care at the crime scene. He wanted her involved, because what they were dealing with wasn't just a simple case, it was a message. A twisted game had begun, and only one man could decipher its rules. This was the Bone Collector. Meanwhile, in a hidden underground chamber, Lindsay Rubin was still alive, but barely. The killer had locked her inside a chamber buried deep in the city's steam tunnel system. These tunnels pushed boiling steam across the city, controlled by strict timing systems. In a calculated move, the killer had loosened one of the pipes and aimed it directly at Lindsay's face. It wasn't just a trap, it was a countdown to torture, set to go off with deadly force when the next pressure release hit. When Amelia stepped into Lincoln Rhyme's apartment, she wasn't sure what to expect, but what followed changed everything. Paralyzed but razor-sharp, Rhyme saw her for what she was: brave, precise, and naturally gifted. Her work at the crime scene had impressed him, and with his years of experience, he knew talent when he saw it. He told her straight, she didn't belong in juvenile cases. Her skills were being wasted. He believed she had the instincts and focus needed for real forensic work. Without hesitation, Rhyme asked her to join him on the serial murder case. At first, Amelia pushed back. She lacked homicide experience and wasn't sure she could handle it. But Rhyme's confidence in her was unwavering. That belief pushed her to say yes. From that moment on, Rhyme's apartment became a fully functioning investigation hub. Eddie Ortiz, one of the department's top forensic techs, arrived and set up a temporary lab. Evidence from the crime scene was spread out across the room, pinned to boards, scanned, and processed using advanced tools. The investigation picked up speed. With every clue, crushed seashells, rare grains of sand, and cryptic codes, they pieced together a bigger picture. Then came the breakthrough. The data pointed to an underground location, with the next attack set for 4 p.m. sharp. Not only that, Rhyme also made the connection. The setup matched a chilling cold case from 1913, when a body was found on crushed shells near the Woolworth building. With the clock ticking, the team raced to the suspected murder site. All signs pointed to the city's underground steam tunnels. Amelia was chosen to lead the field operation, guided step by step by Rhyme through radio contact from his apartment. As they reached the entrance to the tunnels, Rhyme made a clear call. Amelia had to go in first. She had the focus and precision needed to protect the crime scene. Any wrong move could destroy the only clues they had. Inside the tunnels, behind a thick concrete wall, Amelia stopped and listened. Faint groans echoed through the dark.
Mrs. Rubin?
Someone was still alive. Time was running out. Then, right on schedule at 4 p.m., the nightmare unfolded. A high-pressure steam valve, tampered with by the killer, released a deadly blast. Lindsay Rubin, held captive and helpless, was killed in seconds, just like Rhyme had warned. That night, demolition teams broke through the barrier to fully expose the scene. Amelia was the first to go in. It was her job to document everything before anyone else entered. Shaken but determined, she stepped into the chamber. The air was thick with heat, silence, and death. It was a brutal moment, but she didn't hesitate. What Amelia found inside the chamber was horrific. Lindsay Rubin's body lay lifeless, her face severely disfigured from the scalding steam. For a brief moment, Amelia froze, shocked by the brutal scene. But with Rhyme's calm voice guiding her through her earpiece, she pushed the emotion aside and focused on the task. The killer had left clues behind, and Amelia moved quickly to recover them. A carved piece of wood, strands of hair, and broken fragments of bone. Each item was carefully photographed and secured just as Rhyme instructed. She also noticed something strange. Lindsay had been locked in place with an old antique handcuff. Even more disturbing were the clean surgical cuts on her arm, revealing that the killer likely had medical training. Then came a grim instruction. Rhyme told her to remove the handcuff, but it couldn't be unclasped. To preserve potential fingerprints, he ordered her to sever the victim's hand. That was the breaking point. Amelia was horrified. The idea of cutting into a dead body felt like a betrayal of everything she believed in. Shaken and furious, she turned away and walked out. The job had pushed her to her limit. Later that night, Amelia returned home, drained, angry, and haunted by what she had seen. But what she didn't know was that she was no longer just an investigator. She was a target. The same killer behind the brutal murders had been watching her. He knew her name, her address, and had already chosen her as his next victim. She had become a threat, and he was ready to strike. As Amelia stood outside her door, something felt wrong. She looked around, alert and tense, but saw no one. She stepped inside, uneasy but relieved, not realizing just how close the killer had come. Thankfully, Detective Solomon arrived moments later. He had come to check on her, and his presence likely saved her life. While Amelia regained her footing, the killer had already moved on. Somewhere else in the city, he stood silently near a busy nightclub, waiting in the shadows. He watched as people hailed cabs, searching for his next victim. The plan was already in motion. After calming her down, Solomon convinced Amelia to return to the case. Back at Rhyme's apartment, the atmosphere was different. This time, Rhyme met her not with commands, but with respect. He admitted his mistake, apologized for the harsh order, and showed a rare moment of humility. Rhyme spoke with quiet urgency, his voice filled with regret. He told Amelia she had a rare skill, an instinct for forensic work that could save lives. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling. He reminded her that destiny isn't something handed down, it's something people build for themselves. Then he shared something personal he had uncovered. Years ago, Amelia had discovered her own father's lifeless body, an officer who had done the unthinkable. She was just a child then. Rhyme urged her not to let that trauma shape the rest of her life. But their conversation was cut short. Solomon broke in with urgent news from the taxi commission. A student from NYU had just gone missing after getting into a suspicious cab. Rhyme knew immediately they were dealing with the killer's third victim. Drawing from clues Amelia had collected, an intense smell of ammonia, calf bone fragments, and strands of shaved rat fur, Rhyme analyzed the pattern. The trail pointed to one place, a forgotten slaughterhouse on the city's edge, long abandoned since 1898 after health violations shut it down. He was right. The killer had taken the student there. Inside the decaying building, surrounded by rusted tools and rotting air, the victim was tied to an old iron post. What followed wasn't quick, it was deliberate. The killer began his twisted work, one wound at a time. The killer's plan was disturbingly calculated. He caused just enough injury to lure the rats that still roamed the abandoned slaughterhouse. His method was simple and brutal. He intended to let the rats finish the job. As soon as Rhyme's analysis pointed to the location, the entire investigative team rushed in. Once again, Amelia was sent in first. Her job was clear: preserve the evidence before the chaos of responders could damage the scene. Inside the decaying structure, Amelia discovered the third victim, a young student, already dead. His body was in horrific condition. Rat bites covered him, and parts from his legs had been missing, possibly by the large rodents still crawling nearby. The scene was unbearable. Amelia nearly lost control but forced herself to stay focused. She ordered everyone to hold back. No one was to step inside until the evidence was secured. Despite the shock, she went straight to work, gathering everything the killer had left behind, including a matchbox and a weathered piece of paper. Clues that could lead to the next breakthrough. Outside the slaughterhouse, tension exploded. Captain Cheney pulled up, furious. He couldn't stand that Lincoln Rhyme, no longer even on the force, was still calling the shots. Driven by pride and frustration, Cheney seized control. He took Amelia and all the gathered evidence straight back to the precinct, cutting Rhyme out completely. At the station, Cheney's team ran fingerprint tests using basic tools. Confident and smug, Cheney revealed the results to Amelia. A clear match had been found. They had a suspect. Without hesitation, he sent officers to the address tied to the prints. But Amelia wasn't convinced. Under Rhyme's guidance, she had learned to question everything. This killer was too precise to leave fingerprints by accident. Something didn't add up. Quietly, she took a separate piece of evidence and went straight to Rhyme, keeping Cheney in the dark. She was right. When Cheney's team stormed the suspect's location, they didn't find a killer. They found a dead taxi driver. His index finger had been removed, used by the real murderer to plant false prints and send the investigation in the wrong direction. The entire lead had been a trap. The killer had been several steps ahead from the start. Back at Rhyme's apartment, Amelia arrived with the key evidence she had rescued from Cheney's operation. She and Rhyme began breaking it down piece by piece. But just as they got started, disaster struck. Rhyme was hit by a violent seizure. His body shook uncontrollably. His breathing turned ragged. It was the first time Amelia saw the full weight of his condition up close. The moment shook her. Watching him suffer, yet still driven by his mind, filled her with a powerful mix of respect and emotion. Rhyme's body was failing, but his determination never wavered. That strength left a lasting impression, tightening the bond between them. Soon after, Captain Cheney arrived, angry, embarrassed, and clearly rattled by the failed raid. But before he could unleash his frustration, Thelma stepped in. Calm but firm, she made it clear Rhyme's condition demanded peace, not shouting. Cheney, with nothing left to argue, turned and walked out in silence. His authority had been undercut, and this time there was no defense. Across the city, danger crept forward. At the airport, an old man and his granddaughter climbed into a taxi, just another ride after a long flight. But the driver wasn't just another driver. They had unknowingly stepped into the hands of the killer, his next move already in motion. As the taxi pulled away with its 2 passengers, a routine patrol by a taxi inspector caught something off. The meter wasn't running even though the cab had riders, and the required permit was missing from the windshield. The inspector flagged the driver down for a standard check. But the moment he calmly pointed out the violations, everything changed. The driver, who was actually the serial killer, pulled a gun and shot the inspector dead without hesitation. In seconds, he hit the gas and sped off, now fleeing the scene with a terrified grandfather and his young granddaughter trapped in the back seat. Back at Rhyme's apartment, just as he recovered from a brutal seizure, he received a call from Paulie. The news was urgent. A taxi inspector had just been shot and killed by a suspicious cab driver. Witnesses reported seeing the same taxi speeding away with 2 passengers, a man and a child. Rhyme didn't need more details. He knew instantly the killer had struck again. Working closely with Amelia and Thelma, Rhyme focused on 3 torn pieces of paper displayed on his screen. After adjusting the image, boosting contrast and zooming in, he identified the fragments as part of an old publisher's logo, one he hadn't seen in years. Acting fast, Amelia rushed to the city library to follow the lead. After a tense search, she found it, a vintage book from that same publisher. The title, The Bone Collector. It was fiction, but the story was too familiar. It described a killer whose methods mirrored the real murders. Reading further, Amelia uncovered the next planned victims, a grandfather and his granddaughter, set to drowning near the docks. The police mobilized immediately. Units swarmed the area near the Brooklyn Bridge, and minutes later, Amelia arrived on site. Following her instincts and Rhyme's direction, she searched the boat fueling station near the diesel tanks and found them. The grandfather was already gone, but the young girl was still alive, and Amelia got her out just in time. With the girl safe, Amelia searched the area for clues. What she found was chilling: a cleaned bone map and shredded pages from a police operations plan. As she relayed her findings to Rhyme over the radio, Captain Cheney stormed in and took the device from her hands, angry, out of control, and once again disrupting the investigation. Burning with rage, Captain Cheney accused Rhyme of stealing evidence and declared that Amelia would be arrested for taking items from his office without permission. But Amelia didn't wait to argue. She slipped away quietly and entered the nearby subway station. Using a backup radio, she reconnected with Rhyme, who began guiding her through the underground tunnels using the bone map as a reference. But as she moved deeper, the signal cut out. She was on her own. Inside the dark maze of tunnels, Amelia noticed footprints leading to a number painted on the wall, one that looked suspiciously altered. After thinking it through, she recognized it. It matched an old case file from Rhymes' police days. She was getting close. Meanwhile, Cheney had just arrived at Rhymes' apartment, completely unaware that he was walking into a setup. The killer had already gotten there first. The doorbell rang. Thelma opened it and was stabbed instantly. Just before the attack, it was revealed that Cheney was already dead. The man who walked in wasn't a technician. It was Richard, but his true identity had been a lie all along. When Richard entered, Rhymes, still recovering from his last seizure, asked why he was there. Richard claimed Thelma had called about the heart monitor, but something felt off. The timing, the story. Rhymes knew something wasn't right. Suspicion started to build. Moments later, the phone rang. Richard ripped the cord, then shut down Rhymes' computer. That's when the truth finally came out. Richard wasn't who he claimed to be. His real name was Marcus Andrews. He was the killer. Marcus revealed everything. Years ago, Rhymes had written a report linking Marcus to evidence tampering in a murder case. That report led to 6 innocent arrests and sent Marcus, a former cop, to prison for 6 years. Inside, he was beaten, humiliated, and left broken. He blamed Rhymes for ruining his life, and now he had returned for revenge. Marcus moved in to torture him, but Rhymes fought back. Using the one tool he had, his voice, he triggered his automated bed, crushing Marcus's arm in a sudden mechanical snap. Enraged, Marcus tried to finish the job, but just as he raised his weapon, Rhymes whispered something under his breath, luring him in. As Marcus leaned closer, Rhymes struck, biting into his neck with everything he had left. Before Marcus could react, Amelia burst through the door and fired. It was over. She had arrived just in time. Weeks later, Rhymes sat in his apartment celebrating Christmas. Friends gathered around him. Laughter returned to the room. In a quiet, heartfelt moment, his younger brother arrived to join the celebration. And with that, the story came to a close. So the moral of the story is, if your nurse forces you to drink fruit juice every day, don't complain. She might be the only one keeping serial killers from attacking you in your smart bed.